Hope everyone's well. I think we've got most people that are coming in. Clara's being the technician today, so she's going to help get people in that are latecomers. So good afternoon. Good to see everyone that's here. As you might be able to tell, I'm not in the Unidee project space today. In the end, I ended up being in Bradford because came back for the present for last week, and then the travel situations changed a little bit over here, which meant that Yvonne and Alice that are going to be presenting today weren't able to come to Italy, sadly, but they're going to be doing their presentation remotely. And then I was meant to be coming back, and then the UK world-beating track and trace system got in touch and said that I have to stay here for another week. Because I might have come into contact with someone with COVID. So that's why me and Yvonne are presenting from the same space today. You might also get to see our cats if they decide to come and join us at some point. But very good to see everyone. And I kind of dropped in on looked at the recordings from last week. It seemed like you had a really good session in my absence with Aria and Sandy as well, and a really good discussion afterwards. So I've been sort of keeping up to date with that, which is great. So today, I'll just give you let me do the share screen. And you should be able to see the PowerPoint there. So today we've got the seminar presentation from South Square Centre, which is going to be represented by Yvonne, Carmichael, who's the director, and Alice. I don't know, Alice, if you can just say hello and give a wave.
Hi, I'm here.
So Alice is in South Square itself in Thornton, and as I say, Yvonne and I are at home. Alice is the programme coordinator, is that right?
I'm the Heritage Activities Officer.
Heritage Activities Officer.
Here in the gallery today.
Great. So we're going to sort of be darting about between a few different spaces, which is as it should be in our sort of post-pandemic fractured world. So the schedule for today is, following the same sort of format that we've used for the last few weeks. So we'll have a sort of presentation from Yvonne and Alice, and then room for sort of Q&A in that. If you want to sort of pose questions through the chat, then either I'll pick those up or Clara will from the Unidee project space. Also, we've got 5 residents today in the Unidee project space. If you wanted to give us a wave from there we go. They're tiny, aren't they? It's hard to tell, but they are there. And so if they want to kind of, also kind of contribute to the Q&A bit, there'll be time for that. Then we'll have a short break, sort of 15 minutes between 3:15 and 3:30, so you can get refreshed. And then we're going to do a sort of, we've been using the breakout rooms for the group discussions. I think today we're going to try and do something perhaps a little more practical, but we're going to set half an hour aside to do that together. And then in the same sort of format as before, there's a bit of time for feedback from the individual groups there. And then just to wrap up today, I wanted to kind of, because we're halfway through the residency now, I was going to sort of just give a very quick sort of interim report and a little bit of a reminder about what the structure is and how we're working along with that as well. So that's the structure for today. Are you all right?
Yeah.
Just getting the lighting sorted out in our house and some refreshments as well. So I'm very happy to have Yvonne and Alice kind of presenting, because I think when I kind of came up with some of the themes for the residency, particularly around embedded arts practice and the sorts of places that emerges from, and particularly how it's done in this sort of the way that the post-pandemic future that we're involved in, the unfolding of is happening at the moment. Really, South Square is kind of like quite a key example for me, because that's what I'm sort of getting to see Yvonne and Alice work on every day, and it's very humbling and quite an amazing thing to see. So I'm really happy that they're sort of here to give you an update on what they're doing and some of the history from it. You might recognise Yvonne because we did the residency together in 2006, so I think she's going to also mention that as part of the sort of journey in the story. So I'll hand over to you now. Do you want to just use is it the PDF that we want from you? Is that it?
Great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you want me to get out of the way?
Yes. Hi, everyone. So yeah, this is when I was last in Biella, which is 14 years ago. So there's me in front of Cittadellarte and Andy in front of Salts Mill in Saltaire. It was really great. We're absolutely gutted to not be there. It's a real sad thing that I'm isolating here and not able to come to Italy. But yeah, the residency was great for us. I think it was really, really sort of has informed a lot of things that we've done since then. And I really felt like at the time I learned as much there as I did during my degree 3 years before that. So it was a really sort of intense, rich time, and met lots of great people. And so just to... There we go. So we did a project that was linking Yorkshire and Biella, both as textile places that produce textiles. And we were interested in, we sort of found this fact out that really captured our imaginations, that people in Yorkshire Italians smuggled the looms that created the wool from here to Italy. And so we were really sort of excited by the idea that people were working in Italy and the north of England doing the same movements to make the fabric. And so I think Andy might have circulated a little leaflet that I found during lockdown through doing a clear out that showed some of our research. It's quite a sort of dense little thing, and shows how what the sort of things that we were interested in. It's quite a good summary, really. But just to sort of follow on from that, I'm just going to talk a little bit about things that I did between the residency and now. And after having done the Your Arms project, we did a more succinct version of that, where we compared a place called Cittadellarte in Bergamo near Biella, near sort of one of the airports, which is a model village built around a mill, a textiles mill, that was based on English architecture. And Saltaire is a place in Bradford, which is where we lived, and Alice also lives. And these are some of the houses. So we've got a mill manager's house in Saltaire, and then the same in Cittadellarte, and a mill worker's cottage, a sort of smaller version for the mill workers in Cittadellarte and in Saltaire. And this is Titus Salt, who built Saltaire, and Crespi, who built Cittadellarte, and then the River Aire and the River Aire and the River Adder that runs through them both. So they're sort of very, very similar, and that was quite a good way of starting up this conversation and sort of visually showing the connections between the two places. So then, just to talk about, we did quite a lot of things obviously between now and then, but a couple of examples. Ended up doing quite a lot of stuff in empty shop units and commercial spaces that were sort of unused, to animate them and bring people through them using sort of creative, working with artists, commissioning artists and doing exhibitions and things. This is one in the Corn Exchange in Leeds, which is a circular building, which was a place where people exchanged cloth and things when it was first built. The event that I organised was called Drawing Time, and we had 46 artists do a drawing inspired by the space within an hour. So the first artist had 2 minutes and the last artist had an hour, and everyone had to create their work within the space, within that time. These are some examples of one of the artists and one of the pieces of work. After that, did quite a lot of other stuff in sort of, heritage spaces and again, empty shop units, very sort of pop-up, very temporary, sort of, I learned a lot, and it was quite an energetic time, but I did sort of get a bit frustrated with not being able to build on the last thing that we'd done. It felt quite sort of transient. At the same time, I was working to commission pieces of public art, so permanent pieces of public art with a sort of design to be last 30 years in their life, and act as sort of gateway pieces for places. So working with artists that maybe hadn't done that before, as well as architects who have sort of done a lot of that before. So yeah, I was sort of working between doing things that were lasting minutes and hours through to things that were lasting sort of decades. So hopefully for us talking about South Square, we'll be able to show that South Square is something in between and has the best of both of those scenarios. So just to place us, we're in Bradford. This is South Square, right in the middle of the country. And then we've also got the Bradford district. It's quite a big district. There's a city centre, but there's a lot of sort of rural, outer lying areas, and we're sort of in a bit that's beyond the sort of mills and industrial bit, and close to where all the sort of rural parts are. So it's sort of in between those two. It's the area that we're in is Thornton and Ollerton, which is one of the wards, I think it's one of the most, it's in the 20% most deprived in the UK, Thornton and Ollerton. And Ollerton, the neighbouring ward, is within the 6% most deprived. Economically, yeah. And some examples of that and how that sort of manifests itself. There's a third of people unemployed, a quarter of people without any qualifications, 27% of people of households have a person with a long-term health condition or disability, and that's something that we come across a lot in Thornton. It's quite a cheap but nice place to live, and there are a lot of people that have suffer from long-term health conditions. On the right here, we've got the sort of bit within Thornton that we're in, which is a conservation area. So that means that the buildings are listed and they're protected, so you can't sort of knock them down or do any big developments within this area. And we're sort of sat right in the sort of middle of the village. And then here on the left, we've got a bus map of Bradford, which I think is really good in showing how there's a lot of bus routes into the city centre and out to the rural bits, but there's no way of getting from places. So we're sort of up here. You can't get to the neighbouring village on public transport without doing a crazy three bus journey. So I think the consequence of that is that it can feel a little bit cut off and isolated, and people can't get around as easily as they might be able to in other places. So Bradford is bidding to be City of Culture at the moment, which is really exciting. It's been a real sort of gear change for us and for the city, and we're a sort of a part of that, which is great. This is this team of young people that are sort of working on the bid. It's also a city of sanctuary, so welcomes refugees and asylum seekers, and there's things like the Peace Museum and the Peace Studies course here, which is great. There's a lot of empty mills. This is a picture of me posing in front of a couple of them. It was the wool capital of the world, so there's like 100 empty mills in one very small area of Bradford. It's quite extreme. And then this is South Square. So it's a series of workers' cottages, so a sort of little link back to obviously some of the things I was interested in back in 2006. They're set around a cobbled courtyard in a sort of U shape, and we have a series of artist studios, an archive, cafe, bar, galleries, workshop and community spaces. Built in 1832, and this is a picture of it when there were houses and all the residents had moved out. And it was in a really bad state. I don't know if you can see, but the windows were boarded up and some of the flagstones had been stolen. It was a real sort of eyesore. And at that point, this is the sort of 1970s, the council wanted to knock it down. And thankfully, a group of local people came together to stop that from happening and stop it from being knocked down. And through a scheme, 30 unemployed people helped to renovate it into the arts and community centre that we've got at the moment. And once the renovation had been completed, there was that group, as well as students from Bradford College and staff from the local art courses did a series of parties which were themed, very fun, fancy dress events. So this is the first one that was themed on the Titanic. So they made polystyrene seagulls that were flying across the courtyard, and there's an iceberg sort of crashing into the side of the building, and the lamppost was made into a lighthouse in the middle of the courtyard. Me and Alice really like looking back at these sort of parties because they just look super fun, and it was a really good you could tell it really sort of brought local people in. So even though it was an art space, people in the village were sort of coming to these parties and seeing performances, having a drink, food. There was lots of installations and things to see. There was another couple, one was themed on Chinatown, and another was called Paris Thornton, which was a French themed event. We still haven't really managed to find out how they came up with these themes, but it didn't seem to really matter. And then this is, the Thornton Directory, which still exists today, but that South Square is its sort of lead image. And the things, those parties sort of extended out into more sort of festival type events, a gala and an arts festival, and sort of having floats and big sort of dragons floats on Thornton Road, sort of very sort of public fun. And I think we also really like the print and the marketing for it. It doesn't really feel dated, like they still feel sort of quite contemporary. So the sort of design was good. So then to fast forward 30 years, a bit more, I started working at South Square in 2015, and it's quite had quite a different vibe at that point. It was quite quiet, and there was a lot of different people using the space, but very much in their own little rooms separately. So we've got the archivists top left, and the new cafe people, studio holders, and the galleries, as well as sort of community activities like clothes swaps and things. But everyone was definitely doing their activities with their own specific group and very separately. So there wasn't any crossover, and there wasn't a sort of sense of community or cohesion about it really. So what I tried to do was to try and just internally look at it and think, how can we bring people together a bit more and get people working together? It felt like some people had fallen out, and there was not really any proper reason for it. So it was just sort of building some bridges. So, and I think there was also something around sort of the governance, and there were some sort of genuine conflicts of interest in terms of the people running the centre who weren't necessarily thinking about how what might be best for the organisation, but were thinking a little bit more selfishly about their own group and their own activity. So there was quite a lot of unravelling to do and a lot of resistance to change at that point, but things have sort of come good. But just to sort of paint a bit of a picture of that was the sort of feeling at the beginning of my time at South Square. At the same time, more or less, upon starting the job, so I was appointed to run the gallery and run the traineeship scheme, which is to help people who want to get a foot into the arts, so sort of graduates and people sort of have a hands-on position. But then very, very quickly, my job sort of mushroomed out of that into something much bigger. The council here and in lots of other places in Europe and the UK was going through a process of shedding assets and really sort of strapped for cash. So they were getting rid of town halls, libraries, swimming pools, community centres, all sorts of spaces that previously had been run by the council with staff and all the sort of building costs being paid for by the council, trying to sort of get rid of these assets. And the first part of that process was charging, well, they wanted to charge us £30,000 a year in rent, which was something like 2,000% increase for us, and completely impossible for us to sustain. It just wasn't going to work. And these are some pictures just to sort of show it was, they're talking about assets. They're talking about assets all the time, but it didn't, to me, feel like, I mean, it is an asset, but it's a liability as well. The building is falling apart. So it was done in the 80s and then hasn't had much investment since. And so, yeah, it's sort of crumbling and a very old building. So it's very leaky and bitterly cold in the winter. So needed quite a lot of work doing to it. So yeah, and so then just to talk, so that's sort of the context, but then myself and Alice have had a good few years now of sort of programming the space, and I just wanted to try and summarise our approach to that. And so there was a sort of real urgency and feeling of, we just need to do something because we need to save this space. The council was sort of talking about, oh well, maybe it could be residential again, maybe we could sell it off and get some money for it, and not have it as an art centre anymore. So we were sort of trying to dig our heels in and show the real value of it. And yeah, so there was sort of 3 strands to our sort of thinking with the programme. And that was the first one being sort of community, thinking about what people in Thornton wanted to see happen, and really asking the questions of what they want to do, how they want to participate, and any suggestions they've got for things that they might want to do. And taking that seriously in terms of, not just asking once, but sort of continuing to ask different groups what they want to see happen. And out of that came a sort of real interest in well-being. So there's quite a lot of people locally who are interested in alternative therapies, and so a whole sort of programme of yoga and tai chi and things like that emerged out of that, that sort of questioning. And then a sort of third approach to sort of target local groups. So as I said, there's a lot of older people in the area as well. So there's like, I think over a third are over 55 in Thornton. And there's a number of care homes and sheltered accommodation right next door to the centre. So trying to work with the care homes. Also at the same time, they were trying to close the library. So we did actually take on the library, which is just around the corner, and got together a group of volunteers to help run the library, which really helped us sort of extend our reach out to different parts of the village. And then, so care homes was one example of sort of trying to engage people that wouldn't necessarily, take part in a creative activity or attend a gallery. Then we also do a lot of work with schools and the college, and continue that relationship with the college, as well as doing sort of work experience opportunities and traineeships. So me and Alice are sort of, we were part-time at that point. We've sort of increased our hours since then, which feels very luxurious, but we were a very, very small team. So we were trying to do quite a lot, basically, with not very much in terms of budget or time. And then the third strand to the programme, I think, is just us wanting to do things that we wanted to do or we wanted to see happen. So being quite sort of selfish and saying, well, what are the musicians that we want to see play, or what are the printing activities or food that we want, or cocktails or quizzes, or sort of creating spaces that we wanted to hang out in and hope that other people might join us as well. And then this is me sort of developing into my property. I mean, obviously me and Alice have trained as artists and very sort of interested in arts and activities. I'm not a buildings person at all, but I've had to really get to grips with the getting planning permission and feasibility studies, and working with architects, and really thinking about how we can make this building fit for purpose, and doing surveys, commissioning surveys around timber, asbestos, drainage, the stonework, the brickwork, the windows, sort of really detailed work around the building, as well as thinking about fundraising to be able to do those works, and business planning and financial management, all things that I've sort of, it's been a strong, steep learning curve for me. And so I think, we've got two of the same image there. This is just some photos of the cafe and events and openings and things that we've done. This is sort of pre-COVID, obviously, lots of people in a room, stood very closely to each other. And then to sort of just before I hand over to Alice, so now we are in a position just very, very recently to have secured a community asset transfer of the building. So that's been a real sort of battle with the council to get them to understand the value of this is a community and arts and heritage space. And it's been a long process. So that sort of time I was talking about 3 years ago, we just managed to sign that lease and get the legals sorted for that. But that's just amazing, because we're now sort of in the pandemic, and if this had have happened, if COVID had have happened sort of even just a few months ago, sort of 8 months ago, it would have finished us off, I think. Whereas actually having this community asset transfer in place, we've got the building for the next century on a peppercorn rent, has just meant that we've been able to be really confident about sort of doing outreach and working, really sort of going beyond working with people that we're sort of working with normally, and try and reach new people in Thornton. And off the back of that, we've managed to raise £1 million to sort the building out and run lots of activities. And I really think that the activities and the consultation and the asking sort of 4,000 people over that time what they wanted to see happen in the space and what sort of activities they wanted to do, that's what's helped us get the asset transfer and get the £1 million. Without the community investment, that the sort of the bigger things would not have been possible, and that's down to a lot of Alice's sort of hard work on that. And then around that time we've been able to get a bit of press. It's quite a sort of hidden gem in Bradford, like not many people, we want to sort of raise the profile of it, and we had front page coverage in the local newspaper, and a little sort of nod from Vogue, who were doing a piece about International Women's Day. And I think that's everything. I've got a little video to show. It's just a minute that we made like 3 weeks ago now, which we did an open day where we had a series of workshops, drop-in workshops that were very small groups of 5 people for each session, as well as a band playing outside in the courtyard, and the cafe doing takeaway coffees and cakes and lunches. And that, it was really good for us. That was sort of maybe the first sort of event that we've done since March, and it was really good to have people back in the centre. So I don't know, Andy, my technician, can put the video on.
South Square is a community-led arts and heritage centre in the heart of Thornton Village in Bradford. Built in 1832 as 12 workers' cottages, it's Grade 2 listed and an important architectural survival.
South Square Centre is home to a cafe, bar, local history archive, framers, 14 artist studios, galleries and community spaces.
We have gained vital capital funding from the National Lottery Heritage Fund to refurbish the building,
alongside a programme of activities informed by local heritage.
Our 3-year programme will explore local heritage through 3 themes: Thornton's social and industrial heritage, the legacy of the Bronte sisters,
and South Square's heritage as an art centre.
Our programme features community outreach work with local schools and care homes,
as well as opportunities to volunteer, traineeships and workshops.
I ran a series of workshops during lockdown for people who were shielding.
Being the Heritage Activities trainee has enabled me to redirect my career.
Bradford Community Cinemas are based here at South Square.
It makes art relevant to all of the community.
And it is really the epitome of cultural excellence, not only in Bradford, not only in the region, but across the country.
So that was, yeah, just a good little summary, hopefully. We've not sort of even managed to get that online yet. And at the end there, we've got both of the local councillors who have been amazing throughout this process, and sort of it has been quite a political sort of process, really. There's been quite a lot of lobbying in order to secure the space. So now I'm gonna hand over to Alice, who's at South Square in the gallery. And at the moment, there's an exhibition that sort of showcases some of the projects that Alice has been working on. So I'll hand over to you.
Hi, so I'm in the gallery now, and I just wanted to take you around a few of the projects that we've been doing during lockdown. So back in March, when we kind of went into quite a strict lockdown and a pandemic situation, we kind of quickly set about adapting the activities that we were doing to kind of fit in with the restrictions and to be able to do something that local people could take part in whilst we weren't physically able to open the space. So I hope this is going to work. So this is the gallery. As you can see, they're kind of domestic spaces, so they're quite small gallery spaces. So this project here started quite early on during lockdown, and it started as a Zoom get-together for people that were interested in painting, and it's led by a local artist called Angie, who was awarded a painting bursary last year with us. And they are more sort of sessions which are kind of based on Zoom, and people get together and they just paint what they've seen out of their window during lockdown, or walks that they've been on during the restrictions. They're kind of, most of the people that take part in the group are people that are vulnerable and have health conditions. So it has continued in the same format until, well, it's still continuing now. So, and a lot of them, it is like one of their only contacts with people throughout the week. So it is more of a social kind of group and a connective group. So this is some of their artwork that they exhibited back in August, which is a fantastic array of stuff. And then this one here happened quite early on during lockdown as well. We, as Yvonne said earlier, we kind of were led by the community last year in creating a wellbeing weekend. So people came together and we asked local people what they wanted to contribute to a wellbeing weekend, and people had kind of a meditation practice that they shared with us. So we wanted to do that again, but through a series of online videos that were shown during lockdown on our social media. So the videos are rotating on this screen below, and the content kind of varies from Tai Chi, there's music video, there's sort of music, weaving, gardening, Tai Chi, baking, and we've also got like foraging, like this is a list of local plants that you can find and eat and put in salads and things like that. So that's a project that was kind of, led by people's own interest in what they do. And then this one here was called Thornton by Post. So you can see this is a set of zines that we hand delivered and made in our own risograph studio that's on site at South Square. And this was a set of kind of creative prompts and activities that were about local heritage. They were initially aimed at the older generation, so people in care homes, and we asked them to kind of tell us, some of the prompts were to do with like, tell us a story about Thornton or a memory. So that's a story as well. And so these are some of the pages which are blown up to be made a bit bigger as well. So there was 3 issues of that. And then so people responded to one, and then the results went into the next zine, and they were produced. So we did a lot of learning quite quickly about which were the best prompts to get kind of the most responses from them, because sometimes the prompts were maybe too open, and people didn't respond because it was too much of a wide prompt, and other times it was too small. So we did a lot of kind of changing what we were asking people to respond to. Quite a lot of it's about Thornton heritage. So this is a children's character that came to the Thornton Gala in the 70s. And then on this wall, we did another thing that we found as well, because we aimed these zines at the older generation, and then we sort of sent them out to wider Thornton as well, was that some of the older people found that they were maybe too family friendly, and then they found that quite patronising, that it was aimed at, they didn't want to take part in something that they were seen as like childish. So we got a lot better response from this, which was our Thornton based painting by numbers. So we did 2 sets of these, and they were just basic, a Thornton design. So this is our quite famous 20 arch viaduct, which is in Thornton, which is just actually behind this wall further out in the distance of Thornton. And yeah, a lot of the older people really liked that. It was like something to do, and a lot of them took part in just painting one of the designs. So that's that one. And then in this corner as well, we have, we did for the care home, which is a dementia care home. So a lot of the residents have a lot higher needs. We weren't able to go in and do any work with them. So we had sort of set up a series of gigs. So musicians came and performed outside of their conservatory with the doors open. And then we also had, we took those musicians and also had them play in a local garden nearby as well. So that's been really successful, and it's sort of run until just recently when we had to stop because the weather's kind of turned here a bit, so it's a bit cold for them. Yeah, and then so that's, and then that's, these are some kind of, these have got sweets in, so they smell like sweets. So we did a bit of like a reminiscence session, so the older people could sort of guess which sweets were in these, so they can smell them, and it's all sort of COVID safe. And then this is a weaving project as well, which took place in Thornton. So weaving kits were sent out to participants who then sort of woven a bit of a square of this tapestry, which was then stitched together. So yeah, let me sit down a second. I feel like I'm out of so yeah, so a bit about the kind of remote packs as well. Again, sort of getting used to like which ones were kind of getting the best response was a really big learning curve for us. Some people responded to the packs with stuff that wasn't even in them and just said like, I've written a poem, here it is, and then that was fine, and we put that in. So people responded in their own way, really, and I think that's how we do a lot of the work here, and we respond to kind of what people are interested in, what they come to us with as a way of programming. Do you have anything else to say on that, Yvonne, as well? I'll just have a look at my notes.
No, that's good. Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say about the speed of projects as well, because a lot of these projects were like micro projects, really small, kind of responding quite quickly to stuff. Once we got in touch with the care home, they wanted the activity zines really quickly, so we had to kind of get them quite fast to them, and the turnaround was about 2 weeks. I think they would have rather had them sooner than that, because it was this sort of like, we were a bit taken aback by it because everything slowed down, and then people were like, oh, where are the activity packs? So we were like, I mean, we have an on-site Risegov printer, we have a designer that we work with, so it's just quite a small team. It's quite easy to go in, print it in one day, and then hand deliver them the next day, which was fantastic, really. It was really great.
Yeah, I think hopefully what those examples that Alice has given shows that we have been able to be quite nimble during lockdown and just try different things out and maybe be a little bit sort of sneaky and in comparison to other organisations that are larger, that have got a lot more overheads. Bradford is a cheap place to be, and so and having this lease secured, I think, has meant that Alice has been able to move really fast on a lot of this stuff. And lockdown, obviously people have just been sat at home and quite bored, and so if they had submitted a poem, they wanted to see it in the next scene, like tomorrow, yesterday, sort of thing. So it did sort of put the pressure on us a little bit to not sort of labour things too much, or be like perfectionists about it, but just to sort of crack on and do it and learn about how we might do projects through sort of COVID by doing.
And a lot of people, we've connected with more people that haven't been in the gallery before, so the Paint by Numbers was specifically reached lots of people who had never been in here and hadn't set foot here before. But we hand delivered the first lot, and then the second instalment, people physically came to get them, and that was quite nice to see people that we'd never seen before. I think lockdown definitely made people kind of take part in something that they hadn't tried before. People are a lot more open to that.
And then hopefully what comes across, a lot of the money that we've got to do the building up is from Heritage Lottery, which is an the lottery sort of giving money to heritage organisations to do up heritage buildings. And so there was a bit of a risk in doing that we could get a bit sort of the heritage might overshadow the art and the creativity, sort of the art side of it. But I feel like we're sort of doing a good job of balancing those two things, and in fact sort of thinking about history and lived history for local people has actually made it more accessible than it would be otherwise. But I think we're done now. So is there any questions? How does this work?
Yeah, we can move on.
Yeah.
Sorry, our cats just decided to get involved in the Q&A as well, so we're going to have to deal with that a little bit. But thanks very much to Yvonne and to Alice as well for the presentation. It's really good to have a look at this. Max is proper getting involved. Really good to have the tour of the gallery, Alice. Well done on that. I think you should just be doing that every week. It's like just have people sort of like zoom in. So we can take some questions via the chat if anyone's got some, or I don't know if anyone's got a question that they would like to pose in person. It's just because we've got that many people involved, it's a bit easier for me to take it through the chat or from the people in the space as well. I mean, whilst we're sort of waiting on some of them, so I just thought it might be worth kind of asking a bit more question about the sort of context of Bradford and this kind of, I mean, I know that you mentioned that the space came from a group of unemployed people in the 80s coming together and kind of taking on the building and making something out of that sort of quite, in the face of adversity, people come together and doing stuff, and whether there's any other sorts of what the landscape's like in the city, or any other sort of kind of initiatives that you feel kind of connected to.
I think, it does feel quite hard doing things in Bradford. Like there are other cities that me and Alice have both worked in York and Leeds, that are a lot better off, and people have a lot more time and headspace to be able to participate in things. It feels like everything's quite tight in Bradford. People don't necessarily have the time and energy and money to participate in things, so it does feel like a bit of a slog at times. But as I mentioned with the capital of culture, I think previously everything's been focused around the city centre, whereas I think now they're looking at it more sort of as an area, and that includes us, and thinking about things like the rural parts of Bradford are also part of Bradford. I think just to to answer the question that I can see. So if you employ freelance artists or permanent, so we do, I think that's one of the things that we'd like to employ more freelance artists, but we do like to work with people that haven't maybe exhibited before, or artists that, you know, it's South Square's a really good space if you're wanting to have your first exhibition or run your first workshop. It's a really good place to test things out, so we're really keen to sort of work with artists. But there isn't, I mean, the art school is quite small, so again, in Leeds and other places there's loads of graduates everywhere. There's, you know, like a sort of, there's thousands of them all coming out of the art college and things like that, whereas in Bradford it's not really like that. So I think we try to be as sort of open about what our understanding of art is. But that's through having this £1 million funding and the project, we are able to pay people now properly. So it's exciting, and we're definitely in search of more local people that want to work with us as artists.
So Alessandra's just, I guess it's a bit of a follow-up on the question that I was asking as well. Just sort of thinking about the specificity of Thornton, and whether there's other projects like Granby, Four Streets in Liverpool or Grisdale that work in a similar way, or sort of respond to the context differently. Do you sort of, I mean, you've connected with them through this program, really, haven't you? So what's the is there anything about the methodology there? Camilla's also asked a sort of question about maybe you could explain a bit more, even though I think you've kind of addressed it quite well, but just the way that the connection with the local communities is informing the programming as well. So anything about sort of like similar initiatives and the context that you're in, but also the kind of people and how that sort of informs what you do as a space.
I don't know if Alice can maybe take us through to our snazzy pegboard, but we have got a sort of, as I said, like a real commitment to evaluation, really asking people what they want to see happening and doing that in quite a playful way, rather than just having A4 printouts with a sort of what sort of activities do you like to do, sort of trying to make the sort of asking the questions an activity in itself. So this, once people have done an activity or gone into the gallery, our trainee, who was a police officer and then has been a sort of full-time mum, has now started working with us, and is interested in getting into doing arts activities. She's designed this board that asks you lots of questions about where you live, how you feel, how connected you are to the place that you live in, and then also, what sort of things do you want to see happen in Bradford and Thornton? And you sort of take a bit of string and weave your answers around the different pegs across the board. So it was a bit of a mathematical problem to solve, because all the answers for each person, we needed a way to connect. So we knew if somebody's from Keighley or from Clayton next door, what their responses were. So it got quite technical, but I think that it hopefully shows sort of some of the tactics we've been using to ask questions. I guess we have been able to be a bit more, like, we did do a project where we went round and visited different heritage and arts organisations that are a bit more established, and see how they've done it, because this has been, as I say, it's all new to me, so it's been really good to see how other places like Granby, Four Streets have worked. And I mean, you could see that they're making very sort of slick objects, and obviously nominated for the Turner Prize and things like that. I feel like obviously Bradford's working on that stuff, but it's not got the profile that Liverpool has. And Grisdale, I guess, is very, very rural, so a bit more rural than us, but they do lots of interesting things, and I guess sort of there's less people there, so they do have a bit more of a residency format where people go and stay there, and they do connect with residents in Grisdale. But I think we are sort of working on a hyper local level and really wanted to get to know our neighbours and people that live nearby.
But I mean, it's an interesting thing to pick up on, isn't it? The kind of like, I mean, it's not a tension, but the dynamic between as a contemporary art space, or a space, certainly when you started, it was a kind of, you were a curator of the gallery space, and then kind of the heritage or the community aspect of it being seen as something separate. And really, I think what kind of you and Alice have done, which I found quite, great to see at a distance and then also be part of, is really just kind of allowing those two things to come together and say, yeah, it's not a kind of choice between having a contemporary art program that supports artists and community outreach. It's kind of actually the artists that you've been working with really kind of understand both of those things as part of the same sort of practice. And do you feel like that's kind of built, well, I mean, improved relationships, or what's the kind of, where do you think South Square's at now in terms of its kind of standing in the community as it was in 2015?
I mean, I think what I'd hope is that through the projects in lockdown, and that, yeah, even though we've not been open the whole time, there is a sort of an understanding that we are sort of continuing to do things, and a sort of warm feeling around the activities, and that we're reaching out to different groups. I don't know, Alice, do you want to? I
think people sort of see like the way that we're working with schools. I mean, it has sort of improved the popularity of coming to exhibition openings, coming to see music, like having music and cocktails has been, a bit of a draw. But then if people feel like they can come into the gallery and see a bit of contemporary art, but it's sort of a project with a school, I think it's much more relatable for them. And they can say, oh, that's, nice.
We're asking a lot of artists, basically, because we do have artists work with the schools and the care homes, and then also make their own work, and we show that all together. So as Andy said, there's not really distinctions between the sort of community projects and then the arts projects. Yeah.
And so Lauren's got a sort of a comment or a question, which is just wondering about how these, quick response projects that have been done during lockdown, and particularly that have sort of responded to the conditions of social distancing and the pandemic, what the long-term effects might be for those, or will they inform the future programme? Is there anything that you've learned from those that you think you'll keep on working with?
Yeah, I mean, we were kind of doing some work before lockdown about loneliness and social isolation in the area, and it was really interesting to see the change between people sort of responding to those questions about loneliness by going, we know there's lonely people in Thornton, but that's not me. And then afterwards being like, a lot of people then coming back and being like, oh yeah, I do feel lonely sometimes, and I want more activities to do, or I want more people to speak to, and that would improve my well-being. So I think those things have really sort of changed people's mindsets going forward, and I think that has sort of helped us inform more of a well-being focused program as well.
And I think at the beginning of lockdown we found it really difficult, because we had got to a point where the centre, there was a lot of people just using the centre, so lots of classes and tutoring and events and bookings. So you've got the gallery, and you've got a lot of people passing through the gallery to run their own projects. And then when that stopped, it felt quite frustrating. But then we sort of refocused and thought, right, okay, so we want to sort of engage people in activities, but it was very in the sort of early phases of lockdown where you weren't allowed out the house sort of thing. It's like how it felt impossible to get in touch with people that might feel lonely or isolated, like, you're not, it feels like it might be dangerous to even put something through their letterbox sort of thing. I think now that things have sort of eased slightly, the people that we have been in touch with and have completed a paint by numbers or written a poem or, sort of expressed an interest, it's like we've sort of got them now, that we know where they live, and they're in contact with us and in touch with us. So it just feels natural that we'll be able to sort of continue working with them and telling them about what we're doing, and take their suggestions of what they'd like to see happen.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not, that's what's nice, is that it's not going to get lost. We can sort of build on this and make sure they're included.
And there has been a bit more flexibility from sort of funders in terms of funding stuff that can happen, that's more outreach that can happen at people's homes, and sort of rather than in this space, which wasn't before. But I think we can build a case for that, because there are so many people out in the village that aren't able to get out because they're feared for their health, or they don't want to come out. So, you know, engaging them with it from a distance in a remote way is definitely really important.
And during the open day that the video was shot on, we did sort of meet quite a lot of people that we've not met before. So a lot of people that came that day hadn't been, which was interesting, because I'd sort of thought that we might just get people, just the core big South Square fans come back. But in fact, we got a whole new group of people that were perhaps thinking lockdown has helped them refocus and made them think, oh, I could maybe do some art or be, you know, participate in something that I wouldn't have had the time for. They might be furloughed, they've got a lot more time and maybe, just up for maybe being a bit more adventurous. So it's sort of odd how COVID sort of change people's thinking, whilst as at the same time obviously there are people that we were seeing quite a lot that we don't see at all now, and you want to keep in touch with those people as well.
So I mean, I was going to sort of just maybe ask a little bit more about the relationship, particularly between the sort of like heritage or this sort of shift to a focus about heritage, because I think heritage in the UK is a particular kind of there's the National Trust, there's kind of like, you know, the ancient history, the castles, you know, when you talk about heritage in the UK, it's sort of seen as this quite like fusty old persons, you know, kind of like activity, whereas I think the way that you're as South Square approaching heritage and what heritage is hopefully turning that on its head a little bit. So I mean, what are the heritage themes that you're working with, and how are you approaching those as well? Because I think it helps also to sort of kind of join up that contemporary art element as well.
So I think we're definitely in a heritage zone, but we have been and visited lots of other organisations. So there's the Bronte Parsonage is in Haworth, which is just a few miles away, which is where the Bronte sisters lived for most of their life, but they were born in Thornton, so just around the corner from us at South Square. And that's one of the things that not very many people know about, and we're keen to sort of make that a bit more visible. But we're not wanting to duplicate what other museums are doing or heritage organisations, in that they're doing sort of displays of the heritage that are quite sort of permanent and interpretations of the history. We're keen to work with young people on the Bronte project. The Brontes are sort of world famous, and they came out of Bradford, and we really like the idea that when the Brontes were very young kids, working with kids that are that age now, and sort of thinking about them as a sort of the aspirations of the Bronte sisters, that people from Bradford can, even in the face of, so the Bronte sisters had to write under male pseudonyms because female writers at that point weren't taken seriously. So they were really sort of challenging times, and they, wrote really interesting stories that are still relevant today. So we don't really need to go into the detail of them and their lives, but sort of just use it as a jumping off point to sort of inspire other people that live nearby. But we're sort of trying to resist the parsonage, for example. The main audience, it's £12 to attend, to go for a ticket, and it's mainly older white middle class people that can afford to do that, and in that area. And so we're sort of trying to sort of shake the stereotypes around sort of heritage activities, and also challenge the funders, the Heritage Lottery Fund, who fund the activities, on what heritage is, because they've got also quite a specific view, and I think they really like everything that we're doing, but they're a little bit nervous when we talk about it. They want it to be a bit more straight-laced, but then when you show how excited everybody is and how much everyone's got out of it, they really like it. So
there's a project that is probably one of the longest projects I've worked on for a while, because like you've seen, a lot of the projects are quite small and like kind of micro projects, is that we're working with a volunteer oral history group who are interviewing former cottage residents who lived here at South Square before it was turned into a community centre. And I think they've all been ignited by being passionate about heritage through, I guess, because the project's really led by them. So we found these people that are former residents, but the volunteers have come up with the questions that they're going to ask them in the interviews. And then after we've done the interviews, they're kind of extracting which are the key sort of interesting stories that they think are interesting, which then means that everyone in the village finds that interesting and is quite, a lot of them, because as well, what we found out from working with the care homes is a lot of people aren't actually from Thornton who now live here. So a lot of them kind of, they don't really connect with the village so much. But one thing I found about the stories that we've collected in this oral history project is that they are kind of, they're kind of stories that everyone can connect with in a way. They might have like sort of stories of being a child and mischief, or being a teenager and being in a place and that kind of mindset. So they really connect with sort of anyone that has, like a sort of similar experience. And I feel like people find joy in listening to those.
And the plan, once those interviews have been done, is to hopefully work with an artist to sort of animate those and make a video, or, you know, to sort of do something creative with them, and for that artist to work with the volunteers as well.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. So, I mean, we've got sort of another kind of like 5 minutes. I don't know if there's any questions from the Unidee residency programme space or anyone else that's on the call at the moment. I mean, there's still some bits that I kind of think we could explore a bit more. I'm just thinking about the sort of what the kind of conversations that have come up in the sort of other sessions that we've run so far, and just thinking maybe more. I mean, it's been great that you and Alice have been sort of able to sort of talk about very practical kind of projects and exactly kind of like what's happened and how it's worked, and sort of being responsive and what you can do in these specific times, and also the sort of learning. But I wonder also kind of like, obviously you've both got quite a bit of like knowledge and experience just in the more general kind of approach as artists or curators or outside of South Square as well, in working with kind of community. So, I mean, do you feel like there's been anything that's been learned from sort of from the South Square experience that would kind of inform what you do as a curator or as an artist, or how you'd approach like working with people? And also kind of, I mean, there's a question around, this sort of, what we're looking at is this sort of idea of being embedded in a place. Is there kind of like things that you feel are kind of good practice, or kind of that work in terms of becoming embedded in a place, or things that maybe don't work so well?
Big question. I don't know.
I mean, well, let's break it down. What have you learned from kind of South Square that you would apply in like a future project? Or
I think the main thing is that, having all these like colourful pictures of people having fun and it being fun can really be helpful beyond just the gallery and the art space. So getting planning permission, getting £1 million, securing the building, like those activities have been sort of sold in proposals to different things that's then sort of increase the ambition of all of it, when actually really at the core of it are quite micro projects that are quite small and responsive, but it's sort of it's just taken the top off what's possible, and made us be a bit more ambitious about it, I think, which is talking about the sort of temporary projects, the pop-up things in empty shop units or whatever. You'd go in and do a project for a month and then leave, and you'd maybe meet 100 people who visited that space, whereas this feels like you can sort of, if me and Alice both decided to leave tomorrow, there'd still be a programme and a thing happening, and that feels quite nice, that it's not dependent on you to do it, that there's a legacy for it even without you.
And what about you, Alice? Do you feel like the kind of what have you sort of taken from the experience or can apply in other places other than South Square?
I used to do a lot of projects where I would start off with a kind of really broad or really detailed questions or themes that wanted to kind of explore. And then I think through working here and actually just really on the ground speaking to people about stuff, is that it kind of, a lot of people speak to you about what they want to talk about, and that isn't really anything that fits into what you thought that you were going to do in the first place. So a lot of the projects change depending on what people are talking about, what people are interested in. And I think that's where, once I got into that mindset and actually started going, okay, I'm just going to scrap that and I'll just go a different way, is that's where the projects came out that were really popular, the really popular stuff with the community. And I think that's more important than kind of solving a problem. I guess like when we did the Talkioki, which was in situ's project, where we took that to the Thornton Gala, Andy, and you spoke to young people about anything that they were interested in, and they were really obsessed with this peacock that had been flying around the village, like this free peacock. And then Andy made a board game about Kevin the Peacock, who was travelling around the village meeting different people, and then it featured different businesses and different local people and that did different things in the village. And I think that was a really popular project.
Yeah, not everywhere has a peacock roaming around. That was just like, that's not a particular thing in Bradford. So Sarah's asked a really good question, actually, which is quite important. I mean, to what extent do you think having the building is essential? Because I think this is kind of like, this is a good question for Bradford as well, because basically, as you've described, in Bradford, space, like buildings, kind of all those things are available. You know, we live in a city that's kind of where those things are accessible, and you can get hold of a building for 100 years because, you know, the kind of the rent of those spaces or the land value is less. Do you think it's is it essential to what you've done to have the actual space, or could it be done sort of without?
I mean, I don't know. It depends what day you ask me on, because I think sometimes, like during lockdown, it's like we've not really been able to use the spaces in the way that we would normally, and so it's probably not that essential in some of the projects that Alice has been doing. But at the same time, I think what surprised me is, like having done the temporary projects and pop-up events and things, is actually there was a lot of people who are interested in architecture and the fabric of space, and, you know, can identify with it. They've bought their house and they've done it up, and you know, are interested in the sash windows and the stone slates and the history, and, you know, actually they're really interested in the actual building, as you know, maybe more so than the things that happen in it. So yeah, I don't know really. It feels like it works really well for us to have a space, but similarly, it's a series of houses. It's not that inviting as a space. Once you're inside, it's really nice because they're little sort of bedroom sized spaces, but it's not like a gallery, a city centre gallery, where you'd have big doors that sort of lead you into a big exhibition space. It's a bit sort of quirkier than that. So it's not, if you were going to design a gallery, it wouldn't be South Square. It's like the most awkward building. The staircases everywhere. It's not accessible at all. You can't, there'd be no way. You'd have to have 3 lifts to get people up to the different spaces if they weren't able to get up the stairs. So we're sort of mindful of that and try and not base everything in the building. But I do think it's useful to have a sort of marker that people can identify. Oh, you're from South Square, right? Okay, that's where you're based.
Yeah, I think that psychological, like, knowing that space exists somewhere, even though the projects are delivered remotely, is still like an anchor and people see it as a community organisation, whereas if I think that fell away, I don't know if that would still have the same kind of effect, even for people that like came and get an activity pack and just move away and don't actually come inside. It's still a kind of like a psychological space.
I mean, it's probably important to say that, I mean, South Square is quite visible off of the road, isn't it? It's like you will drive past it and see it. So it's got that sort of like, it's got some, well, and you've done a lot, you know, to make it more visible as well. So just before we kind of go into break, I just wanted to bring in a good sort of question from Lauren as well, just about kind of, you've talked a bit about the relationship between sort of art and health and well-being, and that's kind of come about in a, I mean, you've described it in a fairly organic way, that's, you know, what people are interested in the area. But yeah, I suppose the question is maybe, is it the responsibility of artists to be sort of working in that area, or do you feel any kind of pressure to be working in that field in the area, or is it?
I think there is a community centre, a straight up community centre around the corner in Thornton, which I think is great, because it means that there are, if you want to have a kids party or baby ballet, or there's different sort of fitness classes and things that happen there. So there is that space already, and I think what we've tried to do is position ourselves as just to sort of free up. We do a lot of community activities, but it's sort of art is the starting point, and being creative and colourful and sort of it having an aesthetic is important. Is an important part of it. So yeah, I think it's good for us that the well-being and the exhibitions and the things in between can sit side by side. But in terms of it being a responsibility of socially engaged practice, I don't know. I mean, that's how we're doing it.
But I mean, the kind of interesting thing there is, yeah, there is a shift in the UK towards like social practice being evaluated through its impact on well-being, and so, you know, you can see, I mean, I think what Lauren's probably bringing up is that, yeah, you can see a shift from sort of artists kind of thinking about quality of work into kind of thinking, well, what's the benefit, what's the well-being benefit for people. But I think the kind of, you know, the way you've talked about it through South Square is that's been more of a response to the local community and kind of their desires and what the local need is, as opposed to something that's guided by funding. But if it was kind of something that you had to measure yourself against, would you feel comfortable doing that? I mean, what about you, Alice? Because it's such a big sort of part of the programme, really.
Yeah, I definitely think when I'm programming, I am thinking about whether local people will enjoy it and whether they'll understand it and whether they'll get enjoyment from being in the gallery or, you know, hearing about a particular project. And I don't think I would feel very comfortable going back to the way that it was maybe run sort of 10 years ago, where it wasn't connected to the local community at all. And a lot of people felt like, I mean, people do recall like moments of being like, I wasn't sure what to do in the gallery, I wasn't sure how to respond to it, how to respond to that art, because it didn't really say anything about them or about the village or the context of the heritage in the space. And we don't really want to be in that space anymore where people don't see how it relates to them and their experience.
Right. And so, I mean, just the last question that I'll ask then before we go into the break is sort of also, you know, you both are part of the community in the sense that you live in Bradford and are from there, and everyone sort of brought up this idea that, yeah, of course, part of the programming is also things that you want to do and want to see happen there with an open door. So, I mean, what's the, how do those things come about, or what are examples of those?
I mean, to start with, we really weren't getting paid very much at all and doing a lot of work, and it was sort of like, this needs to be fun or else we're not going to last. It's not sustainable, is it, if you're just working really hard, just doing things that other people want all the time. So we did need some things to sort of punctuate that and highlight things that we wanted to do. And yeah, as Andy said, we're both living in Bradford, both interested in art. I mean, I think what's interesting when there's quite a few other little villages around, but Thornton is sort of seen as the slightly more creative place, and that's because of South Square. Sort of like, oh, that's where a lot of the sort of art things happen over there, and it's really unusual to have such a small place that's got an art centre. You know, I think people from other places think it, you know, that are travelling to see the exhibition, sort of gallery goers are a bit sort of bemused why it's how it's come about here. But the sort of being a little bit out of the city and out of the city centre does mean that you can sort of get away with stuff and try and test things out. And yeah, we, you know, this is the we want Aperol spritzes and espresso martinis at the openings because that's what we want to drink, and then actually people are like, oh, that's a bit unusual, isn't it? And then that sort of hopefully, you know, yeah, extending that out to people, they sort of appreciate a bit of extra effort's been put in rather than just some warm horrible wine, which is normally what you get at openings.
People that enjoy that. I feel like there's people that don't come and have espresso martinis, but then feel like they like the idea of that happens somewhere in Thornton, that they could be part of if they wanted to, but they don't, but they're not part of it, but they still like it.
Okay, great. I think we'll move into the break then and kind of say we'll have 10 minutes and come back at 1:30. So we're going to sort of, we've ended on a very good note there, thinking about sort of, things that you might do for yourself that could be open up for other people. So we'll explore that a bit more in the second half. Big thanks again. Cheers for putting the presentation together. And thank you, Alice, as well, for getting up to South Square, making that bit work as well. It would have been obviously nice for us to all be together, but I feel like it's working out okay. So yeah, let's have 10 minutes break, come back at 1:30, and we'll sort of work on this next at 1:30 in 10 minutes, and we'll kind of we'll redo we'll go into the group activity. See you in 10 minutes.